Walk me through what you and our team found in your reporting.
Yeah, sure. So I worked on this story with my colleagues Tanner and Wayne, and we were really focusing on NVIDIA's Blackwell rollout because now, when Jensen Huang is speaking about NVIDIA, he's kind of giving people a preview of the Vera Rubin chips, which are going to be coming out soon. But we've been talking to lots of NVIDIA customers, some of NVIDIA's biggest buyers, and what we heard from them was that, whoa, 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 before we start talking about the next chip, we're struggling to deploy the current chip. And so this chip is called the Grace Blackwell chip. NVIDIA's vision for it was that you could connect 72 chips and then scale that up into a much larger system. And by and large, from large AI companies like OpenAI and cloud providers such as Oracle, Meta, they had a really hard time getting these up and running quickly and are kind of still in the early phases of the rollout as we approach getting Vera Rubin soon.
I would encourage everyone to go read the story because there's a lot of great detail in there about what exactly technically the challenges are, and the idea that NVIDIA wants to sell these chips really in groups of 72 chips to sell entire servers. The broader question I have for you, Anissa, though, is that I mean we've reported on delays that NVIDIA has had getting these Blackwell chips to customers. How has the rollout been, broadly speaking? Are things better now than they were, a year ago?
I would say they're better in this current moment, but the delay that we reported on in late 2024 was really the start of a long struggle. So there was the initial delay that set things back by a couple months, and then early 2025, as customers such as Microsoft and Amazon were getting some of these chips for the first time, they weren't working properly in testing, and so some of those customers reduced their orders or said, "Hey, actually, if this is not going to work." Out of the box, we might wanna buy more of your old chips, NVIDIA. So, you know, now that people are getting these Blackwell chips, there are still these growing pains, but what we did find was that, NVIDIA released a new chip during the Blackwell series. They went from a GB200 to a GB300, and by and large, improvements on the GB300 really did help customers get things moving faster.
I am sort of thinking about this as, like, the software updates that Apple comes out with a new iPhone, there's inevitable. I mean, not always, but there have been issues sometimes. Some people will say, "Well, hey, millions of people have the phone now. Guess what? It's overheating." And by the way, heating is also one of the very legitimate problems that we've reported that, NVIDIA was struggling with. But, I you know, I guess from Jensen's view, and this is what people at the company told, the reporters in the story, is that this is sort of what it means to be on the bleeding edge sometimes of shipping things quickly and not knowing, what happens when you scale things so fast.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective here is that NVIDIA is still a clear leader in the space, and so they kind of and they know that, and so they can kind of ship things ahead of being completely ironed out, and customers don't have that much recourse. We did report that some cloud providers were able to negotiate discounts, and NVIDIA is also, of course, doing some renting of the chips itself. But even still, people don't have a clear scale alternative to NVIDIA chips, and so they kind of just have to go along as, things get figured out in the process. And Jensen is releasing chips at a faster cadence than he did previously. Um, so we'll see how long he keeps up with the annual chip cadence, but for right now, these large customers clearly don't have another good option. Of course, they're all thinking about it.
What do you think this tells us looking ahead to the upcoming family of chips, the Vera Rubin family? Do we have any reason to believe that the issues will be more or less pronounced than what we've reported happened with Blackwell?
What we're all hearing is that, Vera Rubin should be an easier transition. Blackwell to Vera Rubin should be easier than the Hopper to Blackwell transition. But one thing that I'm definitely going to be looking out for is how cloud providers, react, because once you get the chips from NVIDIA, you have to install them and get them running for customers to begin paying for them. And I'm very curious if some people who sort of got burned or crunched in the Blackwell rollout might take some different approaches with Vera Rubin. Maybe push back some deployments and set a goal for, mid 2027 instead of trying to be first, given that, maybe if you're first and you can't get things up and running, that impacts your margins.
Right. Well, Anissa, I want to thank you for coming on. It is a fun story to watch. That is Anissa Gardizy, our cloud and compute reporter here at The Information.